As a therapist, you're probably wondering, what are the essential private practice forms that I need in my paperwork? Awesome. We're so glad that you're here and we're going to be talking about that. Hey, everybody. My name is Katie Lemieux and that is Kate Campbell. We are the co-owners of the Private Practice Startup, and Level Up is a series all about you where we answer your most burning questions about private practice. And this is one we definitely do get often. Also, Level Up is a series about you where we help you work with the clients you love and live your dream life.
Absolutely. But first, before we dive into this topic for today's episode, we want to say thank you to our sponsor, TherapyNotes. They're an amazing supportive startup nation. And if you're in need of a really comprehensive EHR, definitely check them out. You can get your first 2 months for free by using code PPS as in Private Practice Startup. So just go to therapynotes.com. Yeah, this is a great topic and something that a lot of times people are like, oh, paperwork, what a boring topic to talk about. But you know what, guys? We all have to have paperwork. That's one of the things, love it or hate it, you got to have in our profession. And you also need to make sure that you have paperwork that protects you, that protects your clients, that protects both you personally and professionally, because unfortunately we do live in a litigious society and you want to make sure that you're not at risk, because if someone were to sue you, and you happen to not be incorporated, you personally are at risk. So we hope that you're incorporated, first of all, and we also hope that you are protecting yourself with legal and ethical paperwork that really meets the standards for our counseling profession. That this message that we're talking about today with paperwork goes out to all of the mental health counselors. So that's marriage and family therapists, mental health counselors, and social workers, as well as psychologists. So we're going to refer to all of the mental health counseling profession and psychologist as well. So Katie, when we're talking about paperwork, where should we start? Maybe we should hit on some of the headaches and pain points that therapists struggle with.
Sure. And share a little bit about our story. Like, why did two therapists become so crazy passionate about paperwork? For sure. Well, I know, and you know, Kate, it's kind of part of our story is really the pain points.
It is.
Maybe then we'll start there. And interestingly enough, simultaneously, Kate and I kind of had a similar experience when it came to paperwork in our private practice. So if you're new to private practice, or you can go back in time and remember the day, I don't know about you, but I was just so grateful for anything that anyone would give me: advice, suggestions, free services, and free paperwork. I remember when a colleague gifted me her hand-me-down paperwork, and I was so grateful at the time to receive it. But the reality is I started doing my own research in regards to ethics, laws, reflecting back on the paperwork in my community mental health center that I used to work at, and realized how much this paperwork was, like Kate says, full of holes. And paper that's full of holes is not as exciting and fancy and trendy as a new pair of jeans. So that really concerned me in regards to starting with questions of like, how am I leaving myself open for risk? Is this clear for my clients? Could something happen? Are there questions I didn't ask? Are there things my paperwork isn't covering? So it led me into a personal journey and really looking at my own paperwork individually. Kate and I then came together and looked at it together. But I think the pinnacle moment for me was, it's kind of like one of those things, like, it's okay if it's you, but if it's for your kids or your staff or your team, it's not okay anymore. And I was in supervision, and I remember one of my interns at the time was getting ready to start private practice. So we've been going over the checklist of private practice. Did you get incorporated? Did you find an office? And then we started talking about paperwork, and she said, oh, the woman that I'm going to rent from says I could use hers. And I said, okay. So at this time I had already gotten my paperwork up to par, reviewed by attorneys, all that stuff. So I said, oh, okay. Well, do you have a copy of it? Did you get it reviewed by an attorney? And she's like, oh, no. Oh, but it's online on her website. And I said, okay. So I'm one of those, like, I call it Jenny on the spot, pull up the computer, start looking. And I was a little bit mortified because this paperwork was, I don't even know if sparse was the word. It was almost like non-existent. So it led me to believe, like, okay, if this is happening to me as a therapist, it's happening to countless other therapists. And we really need to do a better job of protecting therapists. But also, Kate and I really believe that paperwork is so much more. It's a conversation. It's a conversation. It's a part of your business. It really sets up the expectations that people are going to have to work with you and understand your process. And when you're clear on your process, process, people feel even more safe, more comfortable, more clear, and more confident as a therapist and clinician. I could go on. Kate, why don't you share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, and I had a very similar story where I had first gotten into private practice in 2006, and I was also gifted hand-me-down paperwork from a colleague at the time. Also, I was really excited and very grateful about that because I had no idea what I was doing. I was, fresh out of school. I was a registered intern practicing under a licensed clinician at the time. And I learned over the years that there were a lot of holes in the paperwork and that it was reviewed by attorneys, but it had been many, many, many years. And so, there's a lot of changes in the ethics and laws, and it's important to stay on top of that stuff. So I ended up actually working on the paperwork, and it took me a really long time to bring it up to par. And then Katie and I came together and we realized that therapists really don't have a lot of great options when it comes to paperwork and protecting themselves. They either search on the internet and they're looking and piecemealing different things together from what they find, or they're piecemealing stuff from previous agencies or treatment programs or hospitals or schools that they've worked at before. And they're also asking, hey, colleague, friend of mine, do you have paperwork that I could use? And they don't know when the paperwork was reviewed, or whether it was reviewed, or whether it meets the standards. And so there's just not a lot of great options. So that's where Katie and I realized, okay, here's a major problem in our community, and we have an amazing solution. So let's we spent 10 years perfecting our paperwork before we went into a full-blown summer of working on bringing it up to par. So we took the best of both of our paperworks, put them together. I'm creating new words over here. Sometimes I do that. And then we hired several healthcare law attorneys, family law attorneys to comb through the paperwork and really ensure that it meets all of the ethical and legal standards for our profession. So that's something that we did to create a solution for therapists so that therapists didn't have to waste their precious time, energy, and money creating paperwork from scratch. And then also hiring attorneys who are extremely expensive. We paid those thousands of dollars so that we could be able to provide this solution for therapists, and a very affordable, realistic one as well. We'll talk more about the solution later on. Katie, what should we get into next?
Yeah, let's just talk about some of the basic stuff. So overall, the paperwork that we provide has over 20 plus forms, but a lot of times therapists want to know, like, if I'm going to see a client today, what do I need to have them sign or have on hand? So let's talk about that. Well, one of the things, if you take insurance, is you definitely need an assignment of insurance benefits for therapy. That is a must for sure. And if you don't take insurance, you don't need to have that. Kate, what's next?
Yeah, you definitely need to have a comprehensive biopsychosocial intake and client information form. So if you're seeing minors, you need to have a specific form that asks questions geared toward your population that you're working with. If you're working with adults, you would have a completely separate one, or couples. So you want to make sure that the paperwork that you have is customized and created specifically for the populations that you're working with.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, not only do you want to buy comprehensive biopsychosocial, you want to have a comprehensive consent policies and agreements. A little bit of I call it a horror story. A long time ago, I was out at lunch with a colleague that at the time I very much admired, and we're talking about consent. And I said, well, what does your consent form look like? What does it consist of? How long is it? And he very confidently said to me that he doesn't have his clients sign a consent because if they show up, they're consenting to see him. And I was horrified by what he said. Shortly after, I think our relationship dissolved, but that was very concerning. The consent is so important. And again, going back to what I was saying before, is the consent sets up the structure to really communicate how you do therapy. Especially if this is the first time for someone coming in, they might not know all the laws and rules and understanding confidentiality. So this is where Kate and I talk about, not only should your client sign the paperwork, you should be reviewing it verbally and highlighting the key areas, especially in consent. And depending on your client, so say if you have a court order client, or you have a couple who's going through custody, you might highlight on the consent that because you're working with both parties, that you can't give an evaluation for custody, that would have to be outside. You can explain the court procedures a little bit more. And so you might highlight certain areas of your consent. Something that we talk about is you want to have a very clear cancellation policy. Do not step over that. Make sure not clients only sign it, but go over that verbally. And the cool thing about the consent is it evolves over time by our own experiences. So we've added quite a few bonuses in there based on our experience of like, what do you do if a client actually has a credit card dispute? So Kate had that situation. So we have some stuff and language to cover that. So everything about our ethics, everything that's legally required in the consent. We have no secrets policy if you work with couples. It really needs to be comprehensive, and our consent is 8 to 9 pages long, really covering all those different areas.
It's grown over the years and over our clinical experience. It really has. So that's definitely one of the major building blocks as you're creating your paperwork, the essentials that has to be in there. Also, the termination summary and therapy discharge summary. It's basically 2 different ways of saying the same thing. That is another form that is important to have for if you're working with insurance companies or you're collaborating with someone and it's a mandated client that you're seeing, they're going to want to know the treatment summary, what's included in there. So we have a template for you with that. What's next, Katie?
You also want to make sure, and I'm going to kind of bunch together your documentation form with your progress note. It could be one and the same, it could be different, but not only do you want to obviously document each session, is you want to document any communications you have outside of the session, any collaborations. That's really important. Documentation, as you guys know, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So that's the documentation note. And I was talking also about the progress note. Again, they could be 2 different or one and the same.
Whether you work with insurance or self-pay, every single client that comes into your doors needs to sign a HIPAA form. And in the beginning of the episode, we gave you the information about where you can download your free HIPAA form. Just head over to the resources tab and you'll see it there on our website.
Yeah. And so just to mention something, Kate, I know that you were saying with the HIPAA, every client needs to sign whether they take insurance or not. And you're probably thinking, well, but wait, isn't it insurance clients only? For sure. And in our HIPAA form, we also cover clients' rights, confidentiality again. So it's super comprehensive to explain to your client all of those things as well. So we definitely recommend it to make sure that you're hitting on all of those, especially with our form specifically. Then you have the mental status exam and diagnosis form. If you are taking insurance and diagnosing, of course, it is best practice to do that. So you want to make sure that you fill that out, write up a brief summary. You have all your check boxes that helps you make your diagnosis.
Yes, we also have the release of information form. That's an essential form if you're going to be collaborating with any family members, partners, other providers. You've got to have your client sign off on the release of information before you can communicate with them or confirm or deny that this is a particular client of yours. Really, really important.
True story. And then best practices is to have a treatment plan. Again, if you're doing insurance, that's a must, but it is a best practice. I think it's important to sit down with your client and create very specific goals. Maybe your goals are model driven. Maybe it's psychoeducation based. So it just kind of really depends. Maybe it's based totally on the client, but either way, this kind of gives you that, endpoint, how will you know you're there, objectives, interventions, target dates, etc.
And this next form is not it's not a mandatory form. It's the therapy client welcome letter, but it's a great part of your branding experience. So as you're inviting new clients into your practice and starting the therapeutic relationship with them, your paperwork is the first experience that they have with you and your practice. So you want to, as a part of your brand experience, welcome them, make them feel special and appreciated and welcomed and acknowledged, and let them know what to expect from you and your business. So that's one of the forms that we also include. All of the forms that we just talked about are actually a part of our base package of attorney approved private practice paperwork. We actually have, it's 20 plus pages of forms. Actually, is it 40 plus pages, I think, on the base package?
No, you're right. So our comprehensive package, which is the peak, is the 20 plus pages.
That's right.
Oh, you're talking about actual pages is 80 plus pages, 20 plus forms.
Yep, there
That's
we
the
go.
comprehensive package. I know
Yes.
for you guys who don't know, Kate sometimes has trouble with numbers. So
I do. I swip them around.
Relationship.
That
So
can
I know
happen for
exactly what
sure.
she's talking about. I get to read her
Yes.
mind.
So thank you for clarifying.
No problem. No
That's
problem.
why
So
we're
with
a
our
good team.
so our base package, covers all the forms that we just talked about. And these are the forms that you need on hand to have an initial client, and or you need on hand as the basic form. So as Kate was talking about that, one of the things that we hadn't talked about in regards to one of the pain points therapists have, not only is our attorneys expensive, we don't write legal and ethical language, it's exhausting, but we really want to give you guys your time back, because we know that you in the business being a therapist because you love being a therapist. So we actually worked with an amazing person who does a lot of tech stuff, and we actually created something called the paper document generator. So for anyone who wants to purchase our base package or peak package, we're going to tell you how to do that, but also give you some discounts as well. You can actually fill out your forms very quickly in 30 minutes or less with all of your major identifying information. So going back to Kate, when she was saying about the 80 plus pages, it would take a lot of time in the past when we didn't have the document generator to fill out these 80 plus pages of forms, but now it's super easy and quick. So we would love for y'all to take advantage of that if you are in need of attorney approved private practice paperwork, and we'd love to give you some discounts as well. If you're interested in the base package, if you use coupon code SAVE40, that will give you $40 off. And if you're interested in the peak package, which is our comprehensive package of our 20 plus forms, 80 plus pages, that coupon code is SAVE80. So I said save 40 for base, save 80 for peak,
Yes.
and that will give you $80 off the peak package. And we'll go ahead and put those links in the resources section, so you'll be able to get the links and also the coupon codes. Anything else you want to say about paperwork, Kate?
No, I mean, I just want to make sure that you guys are protected, that you're not at risk for any liability, and that your relationship with your clients from the onset of the therapeutic relationship is clear. You set the expectations, they know what to expect, you know what to expect, you're all on the same page, and you're protected and they're protected. And all of that without having to start from scratch, like Katie was saying earlier, and spend all of that time, energy, and money to create your paperwork from scratch. We've really created that solution for you. So we want to encourage you to check that out. And if you have any questions, let us know. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Yep. Take care, everybody.